I don't care what your policy says, you incompetent little man. Do you know who my husband is?
Victoria Blake's voice cut through the bustling noise of JFK International Airport like a chainsaw through silence. Her perfectly manicured finger jabbed toward the trembling gate agent behind the Apex Airways counter. The Louis Vuitton bag clutched in her other hand cost more than most people earned in 3 months, and she wielded it like a weapon of social status. Kevin Rodriguez, 24 years old, with kind brown eyes and a name tag that read, Customer Service Representative, took a deep breath. His hands shook slightly as he held her boarding pass. He had been working at JFK for 2 years, putting himself through business school 1 credit at a time. He had seen entitled passengers before, but Victoria Blake was something else entirely. "Ma'am, I understand your frustration," Kevin said, his voice steady despite his racing heart. "But the carry-on size limit is strictly enforced for safety reasons. Your bag simply won't fit in the overhead compartment." Victoria's face flushed red beneath her layers of expensive makeup. She was 42 years old, dressed in a beige Burberry trench coat that screamed wealth with blonde hair styled into a helmet of perfection. Everything about her appearance was calculated to demand attention and respect. "It's Louis Vuitton," she shrieked, slamming the bag onto the counter with such force that other passengers turned to stare. "It does not go in cargo with common luggage. I paid $10,000 for this seat. I want your manager. No, I want the person who runs this entire airport." From 20 feet away, Marcus Williams observed the unfolding scene with quiet interest. At 34, Marcus was tall and lean, with intelligent dark eyes that missed nothing. Today, he wore a simple gray cashmere hoodie, comfortable black joggers, and a pair of vintage sneakers that, while expensive, looked like something any traveler might wear. Slung over his shoulder was a worn leather duffel bag that had seen countless miles. What the other passengers didn't know was that Marcus Williams owned the airline they were about to board. As the billionaire CEO of Apex Airways, Marcus could have arrived in a private jet with a full security detail. Instead, he was here incognito conducting what he privately called a ghost flight, a secret quality check where he experienced his airline exactly as any paying customer would. Only Captain Rodriguez and his VP of operations knew his real identity. The leather bag he carried had belonged to his father, Samuel Williams, who had worked as a baggage handler at this very airport for 30 years. Samuel had never owned a suit, never sat in first class, never tasted champagne at altitude. But he had taught his son that dignity wasn't about what you owned. It was about how you treated people, especially those who couldn't fight back. Kevin Marcus made a mental note of the gate agent's name. The young man was handling Victoria's verbal assault with remarkable professionalism, even as sweat beaded on his forehead. "I can have your bag gate-checked personally," Kevin offered, his voice never rising. "I'll ensure it's the first item off the plane in London, but it physically cannot fit in the cabin overhead bins." Victoria's laugh was sharp and humorless. "You're lying to me. You people always lie." She turned around, scanning the gate area for support, and her gaze landed on Marcus. Her eyes raked over his casual clothing with obvious disdain. "Perfect," she muttered loud enough for half the gate to hear. "Now I have to wait behind this." She gestured toward Marcus with her boarding pass. "Is there no exclusivity anymore? Are we just letting anyone into the priority boarding lane now?" Marcus said nothing. He simply offered a small, polite nod, the kind of acknowledgement one traveler might give another. Inside, he was carefully cataloging every word, every gesture, every microaggression. Victoria's face twisted with irritation. "Don't nod at me," she snapped. "Just move aside for actual first-class passengers." Behind the counter, Kevin's eyes widened. He had dealt with difficult customers before, but he had never seen someone so openly dismissive of another passenger based purely on appearance. Other travelers in the gate area were beginning to notice. Phones appeared in hands. Whispered conversations started. Marcus pulled out his phone and sent a quick text to his head of security. "Run background check on passenger." Victoria Blake, Seat 2A, Flight 8227. The response came back within minutes. Victoria Blake, 42, married to Chad Blake, owner of Blake Logistics. Company holds $50 million annual contract with Apex Airways for ground transportation services. Multiple complaints filed against Mrs. Blake at various establishments. Pattern of discriminatory behavior documented. Marcus read the message twice, his jaw tightening almost imperceptibly. Blake Logistics. He knew that company well. They handled cargo transport and ground services for Apex Airways across the East Coast. It was a significant contract, one that employed hundreds of people. Sir Kevin's voice broke through Marcus's thoughts. The gate agent was looking at him with exhausted eyes. "I'm sorry about the delay. May I see your passport and boarding pass?" "You handled that beautifully," Kevin Marcus said quietly, stepping up to the counter. "Better than I would have." Kevin's expression shifted with surprise. In 2 years of dealing with passengers, very few had ever acknowledged his efforts, let alone offered support. "Thank you, sir. That means a lot." Marcus handed over his documents. The passport read, Marcus Stone, a carefully maintained alias he used for these undercover flights. "Hang in there. People like you make the difference." As Kevin processed his boarding pass, Marcus noticed Victoria pacing near the gate, her phone pressed to her ear. Her voice carried clearly across the waiting area. "Chad, you need to call your contact at Apex Airways immediately. I'm being harassed by some thug and the staff here is completely incompetent. Use whatever influence you have. I want this man removed from my flight." Marcus felt a cold smile touch his lips. Victoria Blake had no idea that her husband's biggest client was standing less than 10 feet away listening to every word. "Mr. Stone." Kevin handed back the boarding pass with a genuine smile. "Thank you for your patience. Have a wonderful flight." "Thank you, Kevin. Keep up the excellent work." As Marcus walked toward the boarding area, he could hear Victoria still berating Kevin about the bag policy. Other passengers were openly staring now. A young woman with an iPhone had started recording. An elderly businessman shook his head in disgust. A family with children moved further away from the counter. Marcus found a seat near the gate and observed. This was exactly why he conducted these ghost flights. Company policies meant nothing if frontline employees weren't empowered to enforce them equally for all passengers. Excellence in service required dignity for both customers and staff. His phone buzzed with another text from his VP of Operations, David Rodriguez. "Enjoy the flight, boss. Try not to fire anyone before you land." Marcus typed back, "We'll see how the next 7 hours go." At the gate counter, Victoria had escalated to demanding a private escort to the aircraft. Kevin, maintaining his composure despite being berated for 15 minutes, was explaining that such services were only provided for passengers requiring special assistance. "I am special assistance," Victoria declared. "I'm a platinum member. I spend more money with this airline than your salary. Get me someone in charge who understands customer service." A supervisor arrived, Maria Santos, a woman in her 50s with steel in her spine and kindness in her eyes. Marcus watched as she listened to Victoria's complaints, reviewed the bag measurements, and calmly confirmed that Kevin had followed policy correctly. "Ma'am, your bag exceeds carry-on dimensions by 3 inches. Federal aviation regulations require—" "Don't quote regulations to me," Victoria interrupted. "My husband's company does business with Apex Airways. 1 phone call and your little friend here will be looking for a new job." Maria's expression hardened. "Ma'am, threats against our employees are not tolerated. I'm going to need you to lower your voice and treat our staff with respect, or we'll need to discuss whether you should be traveling today." Victoria's face went white, then red. "Are you threatening to remove me from my flight? I have important meetings in London. I have people waiting for me." "I'm asking you to follow basic standards of human decency," Maria replied evenly. Around the gate area, more passengers were paying attention. The situation had drawn a small crowd. Marcus noticed at least 6 people recording on their phones. One man was live streaming to what appeared to be several hundred viewers. Victoria noticed the phones too. Instead of backing down, she seemed energized by the audience. "This is exactly what's wrong with customer service today," she announced to anyone within earshot. "Standards have completely collapsed. They let just anyone buy first-class tickets now." Her eyes found Marcus again. "Look around. This used to be exclusive." The words hung in the air like poison. An elderly black woman sitting near Marcus stood up slowly. Her voice was quiet but carried clearly. "Shame on you." A young Latino man with a college backpack nodded in agreement. "That's completely out of line." Victoria seemed to realize she had crossed a visible line, but instead of apologizing, she doubled down. "I'm just saying what everyone's thinking. Standards matter. Exclusivity matters. When you pay for first class, you expect a certain caliber of passenger." Marcus stood up. The movement was fluid calm, but somehow it commanded attention. Everyone in the gate area seemed to notice. He walked slowly toward the counter where Victoria stood. "Excuse me," he said quietly. His voice was polite, measured, but there was something underneath it that made Victoria take a half-step back. "I couldn't help overhearing." "What exactly do you mean by certain caliber of passenger?" Victoria looked him up and down again, taking in the hoodie, the worn bag, the casual sneakers. Her confidence returned. "I think you know exactly what I mean," she said with a smirk. "Some people understand appropriate attire for premium travel. Others—" She let the sentence hang. Marcus nodded thoughtfully. "I see. And you determine this how? By the color of someone's skin, their clothing, the bag they carry." "I determine it by standards," Victoria shot back, "by whether someone belongs in a first-class environment." The gate area had gone completely quiet. Even the ambient airport noise seemed muted. Phones were openly recording now. This was the kind of confrontation that went viral within hours. Marcus reached into his pocket and pulled out his phone. He scrolled through contacts until he found the one labeled Captain Rodriguez, direct line. "What are you doing?" Victoria demanded. Marcus pressed call and put the phone on speaker. The line rang twice before a familiar voice answered. "Captain Rodriguez here." "Captain, this is Marcus Williams. I'm at Gate 42 and I wanted you to know I'll be on board shortly for our flight to London." "Excellent, Mr. Williams. The crew is prepared and we're on schedule for departure. Is there anything you need?" Marcus looked directly at Victoria, whose face had gone pale. "Just wanted to confirm that all passengers will be treated with equal respect and dignity during the flight regardless of their appearance or background." "Absolutely, sir. That's always been Apex Airways' policy. I'll make sure the crew knows you're on board." "Thank you, Captain. See you shortly." Marcus ended the call and put his phone away. Victoria was staring at him with dawning recognition and growing horror. "You're—" she started to say. "I'm a passenger on your flight," Marcus said calmly. "Just like you. And I believe we're sitting next to each other in row 2. Victoria's hands were trembling now. She fumbled for her phone, scrolling frantically. Marcus could see her Googling Marcus Williams Apex Airways with shaking fingers. The search results lit up her screen. Photo after photo of Marcus Williams, billionaire CEO, owner of Apex Airways. Forbes profiles. Business magazine covers. The same face, the same intelligent dark eyes, just usually wearing expensive suits instead of a hoodie. "Oh, God," Victoria whispered. "Oh, my God." Around them, other passengers had caught on. Excited murmurs rippled through the crowd. Phones that had been recording the confrontation now swiveled to capture Victoria's face as the reality crashed over her. Kevin behind the counter was watching with wide eyes. Maria Santos had a small smile playing at the corners of her mouth. Now Marcus said quietly, "Shall we discuss what standards and caliber really mean? Or would you prefer to continue this conversation on the aircraft?" Victoria Blake stood frozen at gate 42, her phone trembling in her manicured hands as image after image of Marcus Williams filled her screen. CEO of the Year. Forbes billionaire list. The man who had transformed Apex Airways from a failing regional carrier into a global luxury brand. The same man she had just insulted, dismissed, and threatened to have removed from the flight. I didn't know, she stammered, her voice barely above a whisper. I had no idea who you were. Marcus's expression remained unchanged. Would it have mattered if I was a janitor? A teacher? Someone's grandfather flying to see his grandchildren? The question hung in the air like a challenge. Around them, passengers continued recording. The scene had drawn a crowd of at least 30 people, all witnessing Victoria's public reckoning in real time. Victoria started, then stopped. She looked around at the circle of phones, the faces staring at her with mixtures of disgust and fascination. This isn't fair. You're making me look bad. No, said the elderly black woman who had spoken earlier. You did that all by yourself, honey. A ripple of agreement passed through the crowd. Someone said, she did this to herself. Another voice added, pure karma. Kevin Rodriguez, still behind the counter, was watching the scene unfold with amazement. In his 2 years at JFK, he had never seen anything like this. The woman who had berated him for 20 minutes, who had threatened his job, who had made him feel small and powerless, was now facing consequences for her behavior. Maria Santos stepped forward. Mrs. Blake, if you're ready to board with appropriate conduct, we can proceed. Otherwise, we need to discuss alternative travel arrangements. Victoria's panic was visible. Her breathing had quickened. Her face was flushed, and she kept looking between Marcus and her phone as if this might all be some terrible mistake. Please, she said, addressing Marcus directly. Can we start over? I'm having a bad day. I didn't mean anything personal. Marcus studied her for a long moment. Mrs. Blake. I've been standing here for 25 minutes watching you treat Kevin with contempt, make racist implications about my presence in first class, and threaten to use your husband's business relationship to get staff fired. Which part of that was just a bad day? The directness of the question seemed to hit Victoria like a physical blow. She looked around desperately as if seeking support, but found only hostile or disgusted faces staring back at her. I apologize, she said quickly. I sincerely apologize. To you, to Kevin, to everyone. I was wrong. Marcus nodded slowly. I accept your apology, Mrs. Blake. But apologies don't erase actions. They don't undo the humiliation you inflicted on Kevin or the racist assumptions you made about me. They're just words. A young woman in the crowd, Jennifer Wong, a marketing student at NYU who had been live streaming the entire confrontation to her Instagram followers, spoke up. This is going viral right now. 15,000 people are watching this live. Victoria's eyes went wide with fresh horror. Turn it off, please. This is a private conversation. In a public space, Jennifer replied firmly, where you publicly humiliated people. Actions have consequences. Marcus pulled out his phone and sent another text to David Rodriguez. Delay flight 827 by 30 minutes. Passenger situation at gate requires resolution before boarding. Victoria noticed him texting. What are you doing? Are you having me arrested? I'm ensuring the safety and comfort of all passengers on this flight, Marcus replied. Including you, Mrs. Blake. I want to make sure you're in the right mindset to travel respectfully with the other 347 people on this aircraft. The number hit home. 347 people. Victoria was realizing that her actions weren't just affecting her anymore, but hundreds of other travelers. I'll be fine, she said quickly. I promise. No more issues. I just want to get to London. I'm sure you do, but I need to know that you understand the impact of what just happened here. Marcus gestured toward Kevin, who was still at the counter trying to look busy but clearly listening to every word. Kevin, Marcus called out, "Could you come here for a moment?" The young man approached hesitantly. He looked nervous to be in the middle of this confrontation, but he walked over with his shoulders straight and his head high. "Kevin, I want you to know that what happened here was completely unacceptable. Mrs. Blake's treatment of you was unprofessional, disrespectful, and wrong. I also want you to know that your professionalism under pressure was remarkable. You handled yourself with grace and dignity." Kevin's eyes widened. "Thank you, sir. That means everything." Marcus turned back to Victoria. "Mrs. Blake, I want you to apologize to Kevin, not because I'm telling you to, but because you owe him that respect as a human being." Victoria looked at Kevin, really looked at him for the first time. She saw a young man working his way through school, supporting his family, trying to do his job well despite her verbal assault. For a moment, something like shame flickered across her face. "Kevin," she said quietly, "I'm sorry. I was wrong to speak to you that way. You were just doing your job, and I took my frustration out on you. That was cruel and unfair." Kevin nodded graciously. "Thank you, ma'am. I accept your apology." The crowd around them had grown larger. Airport security had noticed the commotion and was approaching. Marcus saw the uniforms and made a decision. "Officers," he said, addressing the two security guards. "I'm Marcus Williams, CEO of Apex Airways. We have the situation under control, but I wanted you to be aware of what transpired." Officer Thomas Garcia, a 10-year veteran of airport security, recognized Marcus immediately. "Mr. Williams, is there anything we need to know about this passenger?" Marcus looked at Victoria, who was clearly holding her breath. "Mrs. Blake has acknowledged her inappropriate behavior and apologized. I believe she understands the expectations for conduct aboard our aircraft. However, I want her to know that any further incidents will result in immediate removal and permanent banning from all Apex Airways flights." "Understood," Sir Officer Garcia replied. "Ma'am, do you understand what Mr. Williams just explained?" Victoria nodded rapidly. "Yes, absolutely. No more problems. I promise." As the security officers moved away, Marcus addressed the crowd that had gathered. "Ladies and gentlemen, I appreciate your patience during this situation. Flight 827 will begin boarding in 15 minutes. I want to remind everyone that Apex Airways is committed to providing a respectful, dignified travel experience for all passengers, and we expect the same courtesy from our customers toward each other and our staff." There was a smattering of applause from the crowd. Someone called out, "Way to handle that, sir." Another voice added, "That's real leadership." As people began to disperse, Marcus noticed that several passengers were still recording. The incident was already spreading across social media platforms. Apex Airways was beginning to trend, along with airport karma and CEO justice. Victoria stood alone near the counter, looking shell-shocked. Her perfectly styled hair was slightly disheveled. Her makeup showed stress marks, and her expensive handbag suddenly seemed like a burden rather than a status symbol. Marcus approached her one final time before boarding began. "Mrs. Blake, I want you to understand something. What happened here wasn't about money or status or business relationships. It was about basic human respect. Your husband's company has a contract with Apex Airways because they provide excellent service. But that business relationship doesn't grant you the right to mistreat our employees or fellow passengers." Victoria nodded miserably. "I understand. I'm embarrassed. I'm ashamed. I just want to get through this flight and go home." "That's all any of us want," Marcus said. "The chance to travel with dignity. To be treated as human beings regardless of how we look or what we're wearing. That's not too much to ask." "No," Victoria agreed quietly. "It's not." Marcus checked his phone. His VP, David, had texted back, Delay approved. Captain Rodriguez says crew is briefed and ready. Social media team monitoring the situation. Early reports are positive. Passengers praising your handling of the situation. Another text, this one from his head of security background check complete. Victoria Blake has history of similar incidents at restaurants, hotels, country club. Pattern of entitlement and discrimination. Husband Chad Blake likely unaware of extent of her behavior. Marcus made a mental note to have a conversation with Chad Blake about the contract, but not today. Today was about setting boundaries and expectations for respectful travel. Ladies and gentlemen, Kevin announced over the gate intercom, his voice stronger now than it had been an hour ago. We are ready to begin boarding for Flight 827 to London Heathrow. We'll start with passengers requiring special assistance, followed by first class. Marcus gathered his leather duffel bag and approached the boarding line. Victoria was already there, standing apart from other passengers, looking isolated and uncomfortable. As they waited, Marcus noticed Jennifer Wong still live-streaming to her followers. Her viewer count had climbed to over 30,000 people watching in real time. "This is incredible," Jennifer was saying to her phone. "The CEO of the airline just handled a racist passenger situation better than I've ever seen anyone handle anything. This is what accountability looks like." Comments were flowing past on her screen. He stayed so calm, that woman got exactly what she deserved. More CEOs should step up like this. Kevin handled that perfectly. Victoria noticed the live stream too and looked sick. "How many people saw this?" "Enough," Marcus replied simply. Will this affect my husband's business?" Marcus considered the question. "Mrs. Blake, your husband's business relationship with Apex Airways is based on the quality of service his company provides. Your personal behavior today has no bearing on that professional relationship as long as it remains personal behavior." The implication was clear. If Victoria's actions reflected a pattern within Blake Logistics, that would be a different conversation entirely. "Thank you," Victoria said quietly. As they boarded the aircraft, Marcus reflected on his father's words. Sun power isn't about what you can do to people. It's about what you choose not to do and when you choose to do the right thing instead. Today, the right thing was holding people accountable while still treating them with dignity. It was protecting employees like Kevin while giving customers like Victoria a chance to learn and grow. But as Marcus settled into his first-class suite and watched Victoria struggle with her oversized bag one more time, he had a feeling the real test was yet to come. They still had a 7-hour flight ahead of them, and Victoria Blake had already proven that her first instinct was to blame others for her problems. The aircraft doors closed, and Flight 827 began its taxi toward the runway. In 2A and 2B, two very different passengers prepared for what would become one of the most documented flights in aviation history. The first-class cabin of the Apex Airways A350 was a masterpiece of modern aviation luxury. 18 private suites arranged in a 1-1-1 configuration, each with sliding doors that could create a completely private space. Soft, ambient lighting shifted through calming hues of gold and amber. The carpeting was thick enough to muffle footsteps, and the overall atmosphere was designed to whisper exclusivity and comfort. Marcus Williams settled into Suite 2B, placing his father's worn leather bag in the storage compartment. He had designed this cabin himself, working with aerospace engineers and luxury designers to create what industry magazines called the gold standard of premium travel. Every detail mattered: the 4K entertainment screens, the lie-flat beds with Egyptian cotton linens, the individual climate controls, the noise-canceling technology built into the walls. In Suite 2A, directly next to him, Victoria Blake was having trouble. She had completely ignored the boarding instructions from flight attendant Sarah Mitchell about properly stowing personal items. Her massive Louis Vuitton bag was jammed onto the floor of her suite, blocking the aisle access. Her Burberry coat was draped carelessly over the partition wall separating her space from Marcus's. Her purse occupied the side table meant for meals, and she was currently on her phone speaking loudly enough for the entire first-class cabin to hear. Chad. I'm telling you this has been a disaster from start to finish. Victoria's voice carried clearly through the quiet cabin. The service is absolutely terrible. The staff is incompetent, and the clientele. She glanced meaningfully toward Marcus. Well, let's just say standards have definitely declined since we last flew this airline. Sarah Mitchell approached Suite 2A with professional grace. At 35, Sarah had been with Apex Airways for 8 years, working her way up from economy service to first-class purser. She had seen difficult passengers before, but she had also witnessed the confrontation at the gate through the aircraft windows, and she knew exactly who Marcus Williams was. Mrs. Blake Sarah said politely, I need to ask you to store your bag properly for takeoff. The floor storage is blocking emergency egress and your coat needs to be secured. Victoria looked up from her phone with irritation. I'm in the middle of an important call. Can this wait? I'm afraid not, ma'am. It's a federal safety requirement. Victoria sighed dramatically and held up a finger to Sarah. Chad, hold on. She covered the phone. Fine. Do whatever you need to do. Just make it quick. Sarah began carefully moving Victoria's belongings to appropriate storage areas. As she did, Victoria resumed her phone conversation, making no effort to lower her voice. No, I'm still here. Some flight attendant is fussing about bag placement. She paused, listening. I know, right? You'd think for $10,000 they could show some flexibility. Marcus, one suite over, was reading a report on his tablet, but he couldn't help overhearing every word. He made mental notes about the service experience. Sarah was handling the situation professionally, but she shouldn't have to endure passive-aggressive comments from passengers. Oh, and Chad, Victoria continued. You absolutely need to use your connection with this airline. There was a situation at the gate with some thug who was clearly in the wrong section, and I want to make sure it doesn't happen again. When you're paying premium prices, you expect a premium experience. Marcus set down his tablet. The conversation had just taken a personal turn. Yes, I know you have that big contract with them, Victoria was saying. Use it. I don't care if it's uncomfortable. That's why we have leverage in business relationships. Sarah had finished organizing Victoria's belongings and was about to move on to the pre-flight service round when Victoria stopped her. Excuse me, Victoria said, holding her hand over the phone. Miss, I need you to verify something for me. The man in the suite next to me, is he supposed to be in first class? Because his ticket might be incorrect. The request hung in the air like a toxic cloud. Sarah's professional smile froze on her face. She glanced toward Marcus, who was watching the interaction with calm interest. Ma'am, all passengers in first class have been verified and confirmed in their correct seats, Sarah replied carefully. Are you sure? Because I noticed his attire, and I just want to make certain there wasn't some kind of computer error. The words were carefully chosen, but unmistakably clear in their meaning. Victoria was questioning Marcus's right to be in first class based purely on his appearance. Other passengers in the cabin had noticed the exchange. James Foster, a white businessman in Suite 1A, looked up from his newspaper with a frown. Emma Thompson, a young professional in Suite 3B, had already pulled out her phone. The tension was becoming palpable. Marcus stood up smoothly and turned toward Victoria's suite. He kept his voice conversational, but his words carried clearly through the cabin. Mrs. Blake, is there something specific about my ticket you'd like to discuss? Victoria ended her phone call abruptly. Oh. No, I thought there might be some confusion about seating assignments. No confusion, Marcus replied. Suite 2B is exactly where I'm supposed to be. Just like you're exactly where you're supposed to be in 2A, We're neighbors for the next 7 hours. The word neighbors seemed to land with particular weight. Victoria's face showed a flash of discomfort. Of course, she said quickly. I just wanted to make sure everyone was in their proper place. Everyone is, Marcus confirmed, sitting back down. Sarah continued with her pre-flight service, but the atmosphere in the cabin had shifted. Other passengers were now actively listening to the interaction between suites 2A and 2B. Emma Thompson was discreetly recording on her phone. James Foster was taking notes in a small notebook. Captain Rodriguez's voice came over the intercom. Ladies and gentlemen, this is your captain speaking. We've been cleared for takeoff and should be in the air shortly. Flight attendants, please prepare the cabin for departure. As Sarah moved through her safety checks, Victoria resumed her phone conversation, but now she was speaking in stage whispers that somehow carried even more clearly than her normal voice. Chad, I can't talk freely right now, she said into her phone. But yes, I think you need to make that call. There are service issues that need to be addressed at the corporate level. Marcus pulled out his own phone and sent a text to David Rodriguez. In flight. Monitoring passenger experience firsthand. May need to discuss Blake Logistics contract after landing. David's response came immediately. Everything okay, boss? Marcus typed back. Learning experience in progress. As the aircraft began to taxi, Sarah came around with the pre-flight beverage service. First-class passengers could choose from champagne, fresh orange juice, or sparkling water. Mr. Stone, Sarah said, using Marcus's cover name, What may I offer you to drink? Sparkling water would be perfect, thank you. And for you, Mrs. Blake Champagne. The Dom Perignon, not the house champagne. I'm sorry, ma'am, but we're serving Krug Grande Cuvée today. Victoria's expression soured. Krug. I specifically requested Dom Perignon when I booked this ticket. This is exactly what I was talking about. Declining standards. Sarah maintained her professional composure. The Krug is an excellent champagne, ma'am. It's actually more expensive than Dom Perignon. That's not the point. The point is that I asked for something specific and you're trying to substitute something else. In real first-class service, the customer gets what they request. The implication that Apex Airways somehow wasn't real first-class service hit Sarah like a slap. Marcus watched her face carefully, seeing the micro-expression of hurt that crossed her features before her training kicked in. I apologize for any inconvenience, ma'am. Let me see what other options I can offer you. Don't apologize, Victoria said dismissively. Just do better. The exchange was being witnessed by the entire first-class cabin. James Foster set down his newspaper entirely and was now watching Victoria with open disapproval. Emma Thompson was typing rapidly on her phone, updating what appeared to be a Twitter thread about the flight. Marcus made a decision. Sarah, he called out as she passed his suite. The service has been exceptional. Thank you for your professionalism. It was a simple statement, but in the context of Victoria's complaints, it carried the weight of a defense. Sarah's face brightened with genuine gratitude. Thank you, Mr. Stone. That means a great deal. Victoria's head snapped toward Marcus. Excuse me, but I don't think you understand the situation. There have been legitimate service failures, such as Marcus asked mildly. The champagne selection for one. And the boarding process was completely unprofessional. In what way was the boarding process unprofessional? Victoria hesitated. She couldn't very well explain that the boarding process had been unprofessional because she had been publicly called out for racist behavior by the airline's CEO. There was confusion. At the gate, she said finally. I was there, Marcus replied. I saw Kevin handle a difficult situation with remarkable grace, and I saw Maria Santos maintain professionalism under pressure. From my perspective, the Apex Airways staff performed admirably. The comment was clearly a rebuke, and Victoria's face flushed with anger. Well, from my perspective as a paying first-class passenger, the service was inadequate. James Foster, who had been listening to this exchange with growing irritation, finally spoke up. "Ma'am, I've been flying first class for 20 years, and this is some of the best service I've ever received. Maybe the problem isn't the staff." Victoria turned to glare at him. "I beg your pardon? I was at the gate," James continued calmly. "I saw how you treated that young man at the counter, and I've been listening to you complain about everything from the champagne to the passenger next to you. At some point, you have to ask yourself whether the common denominator in all these problems might be your own attitude." The first-class cabin went dead silent. Victoria's mouth opened and closed like a fish out of water. "How dare you," she finally managed. "You don't know anything about me or my travel experience." "You're right," James replied. "I don't know you, but I know what I've observed in the last hour, and what I've observed is someone who treats service staff like servants and seems to think her ticket price entitles her to abuse people." Emma Thompson looked up from her phone. "This is all being documented, by the way. The gate incident is already going viral on TikTok and Twitter. Apex Airways gate has over 50,000 posts." Victoria's face went white. "What do you mean documented? I mean people were filming at the gate, and people are filming now. Your behavior toward the staff and the other passengers is being posted online in real time." Victoria fumbled for her phone, searching social media frantically. What she found made her hands shake. Videos of her confrontation with Kevin were everywhere. The hashtag #AirportKaren was trending. Comments ranged from critical to cruel. "This woman is everything wrong with entitled passengers. Fire her husband's company. Ban her from flying." "This isn't fair," Victoria said, her voice rising. "This is harassment. This is violation of privacy." "You're in a public space," Emma replied matter-of-factly. "There's no expectation of privacy. And you made your behavior very public when you started yelling at gate staff and making racist comments." "I never made racist comments." "You questioned whether a black passenger belonged in first class based on his clothing," James pointed out. "What would you call that?" Victoria looked around the cabin desperately. Every face was looking at her with expressions ranging from disgust to pity. She was completely isolated, surrounded by witnesses to her own behavior. "He was dressed inappropriately," she said weakly. "First class has standards." Marcus had heard enough. He stood up again this time, stepping fully into the aisle so that Victoria could see him clearly. "Mrs. Blake, let me ask you a question. What standards exactly do you think first class should have, well, appropriate attire? Professional appearance? People who understand the exclusivity of the experience? I see. And my hoodie and jeans disqualify me from that exclusivity. I didn't say that specifically." "You questioned my ticket. You asked the flight attendant to verify my seat. You told your husband I was a thug who was clearly in the wrong section. What would you call that?" Victoria was trapped by her own words, and she knew it. Around the cabin, passengers were recording this exchange as well. The viral moment was expanding in real time. I made a mistake," she said finally. "I apologize." "To whom are you apologizing? To you?" "I apologize to you." Marcus nodded. "I accept your apology, Mrs. Blake. But I want you to understand something. I'm not upset because you questioned my right to be here. I'm upset because your attitude towards service staff like Kevin and Sarah reveals a character that judges people's worth based on their job, their appearance, or their race. That's not about standards. That's about prejudice." The word hung in the air like an accusation. Victoria's breathing had become shallow and rapid. "I'm not prejudiced," she said desperately. "I have friends who... I support charities that..." Mrs. Blake Marcus interrupted gently. "The best way to prove you're not prejudiced isn't to list your credentials. It's to change your behavior." Sarah Mitchell approached with their drink orders. She set down Marcus's sparkling water with a smile, then turned to Victoria with the champagne. "Your Krug, ma'am." Victoria looked at the glass like it was poison. "Thank you," she mumbled. As Sarah moved away, Marcus sat back down. The first-class cabin returned to its normal quiet, but the atmosphere had fundamentally changed. Victoria Blake had been publicly called out by passengers confronted with video evidence of her behavior and challenged to defend attitudes she couldn't justify. She sat in her suite sipping champagne that tasted like ash, while around her other passengers returned to their devices and their entertainment. But now those devices were connecting her to a world where her behavior was being shared, criticized, and condemned by thousands of strangers. The flight to London was 7 hours long. They had been in the air for less than 1 hour. Victoria Blake was beginning to understand that this was going to be the longest flight of her life. 2 hours into Flight 827, the first-class cabin had settled into an uneasy quiet. Victoria Blake sat rigidly in Suite 2A, her champagne untouched, staring at her phone as more social media posts about her gate confrontation continued to multiply. The hashtags Airport Karen and Apex Airways Gate were trending worldwide now, with videos of her berating Kevin Rodriguez shared across every platform. Marcus Williams was reading quarterly financial reports on his tablet, occasionally glancing out the window at the Atlantic Ocean below. He had successfully completed the first part of his ghost flight evaluation, observing how his staff handled a difficult passenger situation. What he was witnessing now was the aftermath as Victoria struggled to come to terms with the consequences of her actions. Sarah Mitchell moved through the cabin providing lunch service, her professionalism unwavering despite the earlier tension. She had worked in luxury hospitality for over a decade and had learned to maintain grace under pressure, but Marcus could see the slight stiffness in her movements around Suite 2A. "Mr. Stone," Sarah said, approaching Marcus's suite with the meal service cart. "May I offer you lunch? Today we have herb-crusted lamb with rosemary potatoes or pan-seared salmon with quinoa and seasonal vegetables." "The salmon sounds perfect." "Thank you," Marcus replied. "And Sarah, you've handled today's challenges remarkably well. Your professionalism is exactly what Apex Airways represents." Sarah's face lit up with genuine pleasure. Positive feedback from passengers was always meaningful, but something about Marcus's calm demeanor and specific praise felt especially valuable. "Thank you so much, sir. That really means a lot." As Sarah prepared Marcus's meal, Victoria watched the interaction with growing irritation. She had been ignored by other passengers for the past hour, sitting alone while social media comments about her behavior grew increasingly harsh. The isolation was eating at her, and watching Marcus receive warm, friendly service felt like salt in an open wound. Miss Victoria called out as Sarah passed her suite. "I'd like to order lunch as well." "Of course, Mrs. Blake. The same options, herb-crusted lamb or pan-seared salmon." "The lamb. And I want fresh orange juice, not the artificial stuff. And make sure the meal is properly heated. The last time I flew first class, the food was lukewarm." Sarah nodded professionally. "I'll ensure everything meets your expectations, ma'am." As Sarah prepared Victoria's meal, Victoria resumed her phone conversation with her husband, Chad. This time she was making even less effort to keep her voice down. "Chad, I need you to listen carefully. When we land in London, I want you to call your contact at Apex Airways immediately. This has been completely unacceptable, and I want that flight attendant written up." Marcus looked up from his tablet. Sarah was within earshot, carefully plating Victoria's lunch, and her hands had tensed slightly as she heard Victoria planning to file a complaint against her. "Yes, I know the contract is important," Victoria continued, "but so is proper customer service. I've been treated with complete disrespect, and I want someone held accountable, Mrs." Blake Marcus said quietly. "May I ask what specific service failure you're planning to report?" Victoria covered her phone and turned toward him with obvious irritation. "I don't think that's any of your business. Actually, as a fellow passenger who has witnessed the service on this flight, I'm curious about your specific complaints. Sarah has been nothing but professional and courteous. She argued with me about the champagne selection. She was dismissive about my storage preferences, and she clearly has favorites among the passengers. The accusations hung in the air like smoke. Other passengers in the cabin were listening now, including James Foster and Emma Thompson, who had both witnessed the earlier exchanges. "I haven't seen any of that," James called out from Suite 1A. "Sarah has been exceptional with every passenger." "I agree," added Emma from Suite 3B. "If anyone has been inappropriate, it hasn't been the flight attendant." Victoria's face reddened. "You people don't understand. This is about service standards. This is about getting what you pay for." "No," Marcus said firmly. "This is about you looking for someone to blame for your own behavior. Sarah has done nothing wrong, and you know it." Victoria stood up abruptly, her champagne glass still in her hand. "How dare you tell me what I know? You don't know anything about me or my standards or what I expect from service." "You're right," Marcus replied calmly. "I only know what I've observed. And what I've observed is someone who has been rude to gate staff, dismissive of flight crew, and hostile toward fellow passengers. That's not about service standards. That's about character." The word character hit Victoria like a physical blow. She had been confronted with her behavior multiple times now, seen it reflected in social media posts, and been called out by multiple passengers. But instead of reflecting on her actions, her anger was escalating. "Don't you dare lecture me about character," she snapped, taking a step toward Marcus's suite. "You don't know anything about my character. You don't know what I do for charity, what I contribute to my community, who I am as a person." Marcus remained seated, his voice level and calm. "You're right, Mrs. Blake. I don't know those things. But character isn't about what we do when people are watching and praising us. It's about how we treat people when we think no one important is looking. It's about how we treat the gate agent, the flight attendant, the person sitting next to us on a plane." The observation was devastating in its simplicity and accuracy. Victoria's entire public persona was built around her charitable activities and social status, but her private behavior toward service workers revealed something entirely different. "You think you're so wise," Victoria said, her voice rising. "So much better than everyone else. But you're just another passenger and coach pretending to belong in first class." The racial undertone was unmistakable now, and the first-class cabin went completely silent. Emma Thompson's phone was openly recording. James Foster had set down his meal entirely and was watching with alarm. Marcus stood up slowly, his movement fluid and controlled. "Mrs. Blake, what exactly do you mean by pretending to belong?" Victoria realized she had crossed a line, but instead of backing down, she doubled down. "I mean, some people earn their way into first class and others, well, let's just say standards aren't what they used to be." Sarah Mitchell had been preparing to serve Victoria's lunch, but she stopped dead in her tracks. The tomato juice she had poured as a beverage accompaniment sat on her service tray untouched. Mrs. Blake Sarah said quietly, "I need to ask you to return to your seat and lower your voice. You're disturbing other passengers." Victoria whirled around to face Sarah, her anger finding a new target. "Don't tell me what to do. Don't you dare tell me what to do. This is exactly what I'm talking about. Staff who don't know their place." The phrase, "know their place," was loaded with meaning, especially coming after her coded comments about Marcus. The racism was no longer subtle or deniable. Marcus took a step forward. "Mrs. Blake, you need to stop, right now." Or what Victoria demanded. "You'll call the captain. You'll have me arrested." "You, and what authority?" She grabbed the glass of tomato juice from Sarah's tray, her hand shaking with rage and adrenaline. "You want to know what I think about people who don't know their place." The moment seemed to freeze. Marcus standing calmly in the aisle. Sarah holding her service tray with wide eyes. Victoria with a glass of tomato juice in her raised hand. Other passengers watching in horror and fascination as the confrontation reached its breaking point. I think Victoria said, her voice venomous with rage, that some people need to be reminded of where they belong. She hurled the tomato juice directly at Marcus's face. The thick red liquid hit him square in the chest and chin, splashing across his gray hoodie and dripping onto the plush carpet of the first-class cabin. The juice looked like blood against the pale fabric, dark and staining and viscous. The first-class cabin erupted. "Oh my God!" Emma Thompson shouted, her phone capturing every second of the assault. "That's assault!" James Foster yelled, standing up from his seat. "That's actual assault!" Sarah Mitchell dropped her service tray with a crash, glasses and plates scattering across the floor. "Mrs. Blake, return to your seat immediately." But Marcus didn't react the way Victoria expected. He didn't yell. He didn't call for security. He didn't even wipe his face immediately. Instead, he stood perfectly still, tomato juice dripping from his chin. His dark eyes locked on Victoria's face with an expression that was somehow more terrifying than anger would have been. Victoria suddenly realized what she had done. The rage that had carried her through the assault was evaporating, replaced by a creeping horror as she understood the magnitude of her action. She started to say, but Marcus held up a hand. "No," he said quietly. His voice was calm, but there was something underneath it that made Victoria take a step back. "Don't speak. Don't say another word." Marcus reached for the hot towel that Sarah had dropped when the tray fell. He slowly, deliberately wiped his face and neck, cleaning away the tomato juice with careful, measured movements. The silence in the cabin was deafening. When his face was clean, Marcus looked directly at Victoria Blake. She was standing frozen, the empty glass still in her hand, her face a mask of dawning horror. "Mrs. Blake," Marcus said, his voice carrying clearly through the silent cabin, "you just made the worst mistake of your life." Victoria's mouth opened and closed soundlessly. "You see," Marcus continued, still speaking in that terrifyingly calm voice, "I was willing to overlook your rudeness to the staff. I was willing to forgive your racist implications about my appearance. I was even willing to accept your insincere apologies and your promises to do better." He took a step toward her, and Victoria backed against the wall of her suite. "But you just physically assaulted me, in front of witnesses, on camera, and you did it while making explicitly racist statements about people knowing their place." Victoria found her voice barely above a whisper. "I didn't mean... I was angry. I lost my temper." Marcus reached into his pocket and pulled out his phone. His fingers moved across the screen with deliberate precision. "Who are you calling?" Victoria asked, panic creeping into her voice. Marcus looked at her with something that might have been pity. "I'm calling the captain to request an emergency landing. I'm calling airport security to meet this aircraft. And then I'm calling the FBI because what you just did is a federal crime." The word federal hit Victoria like a physical blow. Her knees went weak and she sank back into her seat. "Please," she whispered. "Please don't. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I'll pay for your clothes. I'll pay for cleaning. I'll do whatever you want." Marcus held up the phone so Victoria could see the screen. He had pulled up his contacts, and the entry he had selected was labeled Captain Rodriguez, direct line. Mrs. Blake, Marcus said, his thumb hovering over the call button, "Let me tell you exactly who you just assaulted." Victoria's face was white as paper. Around the cabin, other passengers were recording, texting, posting updates in real time. The viral moment was exploding across social media platforms faster than either of them could track. "My name, Marcus," said clearly, "is Marcus Williams. And I own this airline." Victoria Blake's world came crashing down around her in the space of 5 simple words. The silence that followed Marcus's revelation was profound and terrible. Victoria Blake sat frozen in her first-class suite, the empty tomato juice glass still clutched in her shaking hand, staring at the man she had just assaulted with growing horror. That's not possible," she whispered. But even as the words left her mouth, she was pulling out her phone with trembling fingers. The Google search for Marcus Williams Apex Airways lit up her screen with photograph after photograph of the same face, the same intelligent dark eyes, the same calm expression, just usually wearing expensive suits instead of a hoodie. Forbes Marcus Williams, the 34-year-old billionaire who transformed Apex Airways. Business Week. How Marcus Williams built a luxury airline empire. Fortune CEO of the Year. Marcus Williams revolutionizes air travel. Image after image confirmed what her mind was struggling to process. The man sitting next to her, the man she had insulted and dismissed and just physically assaulted, wasn't just a passenger. He was the owner of the airline. He was worth over $3 billion. He employed 30,000 people worldwide. And she had just thrown tomato juice in his face while telling him he didn't belong in first class. Oh, God. Victoria moaned, the phone slipping from her nerveless fingers. Oh, God, oh, God, oh, God. Around the first-class cabin, other passengers were having their own moments of recognition. Emma Thompson was frantically updating her social media followers. The man she assaulted is the CEO of the airline. Her live stream viewer count had exploded past 100,000 people watching in real time. James Foster was shaking his head in amazement. I knew something was different about him, the way he carried himself, the way he spoke to the staff. But I never imagined. Sarah Mitchell stood frozen with her crashed service tray staring at Marcus with wide eyes. She had worked for Apex Airways for 8 years, but she had never met the CEO in person. Company meetings were always handled by regional managers or VPs. The mysterious Mr. Williams was a figure she knew from corporate newsletters and annual reports, not someone who traveled incognito in his own first-class cabin. Marcus wiped the last of the tomato juice from his chin and looked down at his stained hoodie. The irony wasn't lost on him. Victoria had attacked him for being inappropriately dressed for first class, and now his clothing was truly ruined. But the stain wasn't from poor fashion choices. It was from her prejudice and rage. Mr. Williams. Sarah finally found her voice. I am so sorry. I should have intervened sooner. Marcus held up a hand to stop her. Sarah, you did everything right. You maintained professionalism under impossible circumstances. This situation escalated beyond anything you could have controlled. He reached for his phone and pressed the contact for Captain Rodriguez. The call was answered on the first ring. Captain Rodriguez. Captain, this is Marcus Williams. We have a situation in first class that requires immediate attention. Yes, sir. What do you need? I need you to contact air traffic control and request clearance for an emergency diversion to the nearest airport. We have a passenger who has committed assault and needs to be removed from this aircraft immediately. Victoria's breathing had become rapid and shallow. No, please, you can't. I have meetings in London. I have people waiting for me. My husband. His business. Marcus continued speaking to the captain, his voice calm and businesslike. The passenger is Victoria Blake, seat 2A. She physically assaulted me with a thrown beverage while making explicitly racist statements. The entire incident was witnessed by multiple passengers and recorded on several devices. Understood, Mr. Williams. I'll contact ATC immediately. We're approximately 2 hours out from Shannon Airport in Ireland. Would you prefer to divert there or continue to London and have authorities meet us on arrival? Marcus looked at Victoria, who was now openly weeping. Mascara ran down her cheeks in dark streams. Her perfect hair was disheveled, her designer outfit wrinkled from stress. Shannon, Marcus decided. I want her removed from this aircraft as soon as legally possible. Copy that. I'll make the arrangements. Marcus ended the call and immediately dialed another number. Victoria watched in growing panic as he placed a second call. David, it's Marcus. I need you to implement Code Red protocol immediately. David Rodriguez, Marcus's VP of Operations, was clearly startled by the call. Code Red. Are you safe, sir? I'm fine, but we have a situation. I need you to terminate the Blake Logistics contract immediately. Full cancellation effective today. I also need you to contact our legal team and prepare assault charges against Victoria Blake. And David, I need you to put out a company-wide memo about our zero-tolerance policy for discrimination and assault. Understood, sir. Blake Logistics. That's a $50 million annual contract. Are you certain about immediate termination? Marcus looked at Victoria, who had gone completely white. Absolutely certain. I'll send you the details when we land. As Marcus ended the second call, Victoria found her voice again, though it came out as a broken whisper. Please, I'll do anything. I'll apologize publicly. I'll donate to charity. My husband's company has 300 employees. You can't destroy their lives because of my mistake. Marcus sat back down in his suite and looked at her with something that might have been pity. Mrs. Blake, your husband's company isn't being destroyed because of your mistake. It's being terminated because your behavior demonstrates a pattern of discrimination that I can't have associated with Apex Airways. You told me yourself that you planned to use his business relationship to have my employees fired for doing their jobs correctly. Victoria's phone buzzed with an incoming call. The screen showed Chad, husband. She stared at it, knowing she couldn't face that conversation yet. Aren't you going to answer? Marcus asked. Victoria shook her head miserably. I can't tell him what I've done. His business will be ruined. Everything we've worked for. Emma Thompson looked up from her phone where she was monitoring the social media explosion in real time. Tomatogate is the #1 trending topic worldwide. The video has been shared over 1 million times in the last 10 minutes. What video? Victoria asked with fresh horror. The one where you threw the drink at Mr. Williams while telling him he doesn't belong in first class. It's everywhere. Twitter, TikTok, Instagram, Facebook. And people are identifying you. Your name, your husband's company, everything. Victoria's phone buzzed again. This time it was a call from an unknown number. Then another, then another. Her phone was being flooded with calls as news outlets, bloggers, and internet sleuths tracked down her contact information. Turn it off, Marcus advised. It's only going to get worse. Captain Rodriguez's voice came over the cabin intercom. Ladies and gentlemen, this is your captain. Due to a passenger situation, we will be making an unscheduled stop in Shannon, Ireland. We expect to be on the ground in approximately 90 minutes. We apologize for any inconvenience this may cause, and Apex Airways will provide full compensation for the delay to all affected passengers. A ripple of conversation went through the first-class cabin. Passengers were calling their connections, updating travel plans, and most importantly, continuing to document the aftermath of Victoria's assault. James Foster stood up and approached Marcus's suite. Mr. Williams. I'm James Foster, senior partner at Foster & Associates. I witnessed the entire incident, and I'd be happy to provide a statement to authorities when we land. Thank you, Mr. Foster. That would be very helpful. Emma Thompson also stood. Mr. Williams. I'm Emma Thompson. I work in social media marketing, and I recorded most of what happened. I can provide copies of the video evidence if needed. I appreciate that, Ms. Thompson. One by one, the other first-class passengers offered their support and testimony. Victoria sat alone in her suite, completely isolated, watching as an entire cabin full of witnesses lined up to testify against her. Sarah Mitchell approached Marcus's suite cautiously. Mr. Williams, is there anything I can do for you? A change of clothes, perhaps? Or something for the stain? Marcus looked down at his ruined hoodie. Thank you, Sarah. I think I'll need to change before we land. He paused, then added, and Sarah, I want you to know that your handling of this situation has been exemplary. You'll be receiving a commendation in your personnel file. Sarah's eyes filled with tears of relief and gratitude. Thank you, sir. That means everything. as the aircraft continued toward its unscheduled landing in Ireland. Marcus pulled out his tablet and began typing an email to his entire executive team. Today I witnessed firsthand the kind of discrimination and assault that no passenger or employee should ever face. Effective immediately, we are implementing enhanced training protocols, stronger protections for our staff, and absolute zero tolerance for discriminatory behavior from passengers. Excellence in service requires dignity for everyone involved. We will not compromise on this principle. Ems Williams. Victoria's phone had stopped ringing, but now text messages were flooding in. Friends from her country club who had seen the videos. Business associates asking if it was really her. Her sister demanding to know what was happening. The worst message came from her housekeeper, Mrs. Blake. There are news vans outside the house. Should I let them in? Victoria realized that her life as she knew it was over. In the span of 2 hours, she had gone from a wealthy socialite with social standing and influence to a global symbol of racist entitlement. The Internet never forgot, and the Internet never forgave. Mr. Williams, she said quietly, her voice barely audible over the aircraft's engines. Is there anything I can do to make this right? Any way I can? Marcus looked at her for a long moment. Mrs. Blake, the only thing you can do now is learn from this experience. Understand that every person you encounter, from gate agents to CEOs, deserves basic human respect. Understand that your wealth and status don't give you the right to treat others as less than human. And understand that actions have consequences. As the aircraft began its descent toward Shannon Airport, Victoria Blake understood that she was landing in more than just Ireland. She was landing in a new reality where her behavior had consequences she could never have imagined. The viral video of her assault on Marcus Williams would be viewed over 50 million times in the first 24 hours. Her husband's business would declare bankruptcy within a week. Her country club would revoke her membership. Her friends would distance themselves from the scandal. But all of that was still to come. Right now, she simply sat in her first-class suite watching the Irish coastline appear below and waited for the justice she had brought upon herself. Shannon Airport in Ireland had never seen anything quite like the emergency landing of Apex Airways Flight 827. Word had spread through air traffic control, airport security, and Irish police that a billionaire CEO had been assaulted by a passenger in a racist attack, all captured on video and broadcasting to millions of viewers worldwide in real time. As the aircraft touched down on the runway, Victoria Blake sat hunched in her first-class suite, her face buried in her hands. The descent had been the longest 40 minutes of her life, watching through the window as her phone continued buzzing with notifications she couldn't bring herself to read. The social media explosion had reached nuclear proportions. Tomatogate was trending in 12 countries. News outlets were scrambling to break the story. Her face was being broadcast around the world as the symbol of entitled racism. Marcus Williams sat calmly in the adjacent suite, having changed into a clean white polo shirt from his travel bag. The stained hoodie was carefully bagged as evidence. He had spent the descent coordinating with his legal team, his operations staff, and law enforcement officials on the ground. Ladies and gentlemen, Captain Rodriguez announced we have arrived at Shannon Airport. Please remain seated while Irish police board the aircraft to address the passenger situation. This should take approximately 30 minutes, after which we will refuel and continue to London. Victoria's breathing became rapid and shallow as she heard the word police. The reality of criminal charges, real legal consequences, was finally sinking in. I need to call my lawyer, she whispered to herself, then louder. I need to call my lawyer. Marcus turned toward her. Mrs. Blake, you have every right to legal representation. However, I should inform you that assault on an aircraft is a federal crime in both the United States and Ireland. You're looking at criminal charges, civil liability, and permanent bans from commercial aviation. Victoria's phone rang again. This time, the caller ID showed Chad. husband with a photo of her smiling husband on a golf course. She stared at the screen, knowing she couldn't avoid this conversation forever. "Answer it," Marcus said quietly. "He deserves to know what's happening to his business." With shaking hands, Victoria accepted the call. "Victoria. What the hell is going on? My office has been flooded with calls. Someone said you're all over the internet assaulting someone on a plane. Please tell me this is some kind of mistake." Victoria closed her eyes. "Chad, Victoria, answer me. Is it true? Did you attack someone on an airplane?" Yes. I lost my temper. I threw a drink at another passenger." The silence on the other end of the line lasted for 10 agonizing seconds. "You threw a drink at another passenger." Chad's voice was flat, emotionless. "And this is on the internet?" "Yes." "How bad is it?" Victoria looked around the cabin. Emma Thompson was still live streaming to over 200,000 viewers. James Foster was typing what appeared to be a detailed statement on his laptop. Sarah Mitchell was preparing a written report for the authorities. "It's very bad, Chad. Very, very bad." Another pause. "Victoria, tell me you didn't. Please tell me there wasn't a racial component to this." Victoria's silence was answer enough. "Oh, God," Chad whispered. "Oh, Victoria, what have you done?" The man who was sitting next to me. "Chad, it's Marcus Williams." "Who's Marcus Williams?" "He's the CEO of Apex Airways. He owns the airline. He owns the company that holds your contract." The silence this time lasted nearly 30 seconds. Victoria could hear her husband's breathing, could picture him sitting in his office, understanding that his life's work had just been destroyed by his wife's racism. Victoria Chad's voice was barely a whisper. "How much money does our contract with Apex Airways represent? $50 million a year. And you? You racially profiled and then physically assaulted the owner of the company." "Yes." The line went dead. Chad had hung up on her. Outside the aircraft windows, Victoria could see Irish police vehicles surrounding the plane. Officers in high-visibility vests were approaching the aircraft stairs. News vans were pulling up to the perimeter fence. Photographers with telephoto lenses were setting up positions. Marcus's phone buzzed with an update from David Rodriguez Blake Logistics contract officially terminated. Legal department has prepared charges for assault harassment and violation of federal aviation regulations. Media requests are flooding in. CNN, BBC, Fox News all want interviews. Stock price up 3% on news of strong stance against discrimination. Marcus typed back, "No interviews until this is fully resolved. Focus on employee support and policy reinforcement." The aircraft door opened and Irish police officers boarded the plane. The lead officer, Inspector Liam O'Sullivan, was a 20-year veteran who had seen his share of unusual situations, but a viral assault case on a billionaire's private aircraft was definitely a first. Mr. Williams, Inspector O'Sullivan, approached Marcus's suite. "I'm Inspector O'Sullivan with the Irish National Police. We understand there's been an incident." Marcus stood and shook the inspector's hand. "Inspector, thank you for responding so quickly. Yes, there has been an incident. The passenger in seat 2A, Victoria Blake, physically assaulted me approximately 2 hours ago while making explicitly racist statements." Inspector O'Sullivan looked toward Victoria, who was curled in her seat like a wounded animal. "And you have witnesses to this alleged assault?" "Multiple witnesses," James Foster called out, standing up from his seat. "I'm James Foster, attorney. I witnessed the entire incident and recorded portions of it." Emma Thompson raised her phone. "I have the assault captured on video along with the racist statements that preceded it." Inspector O'Sullivan nodded. "Mrs. Blake, I need you to come with me. You're being detained pending investigation of assault charges." Victoria looked up with tear-streaked eyes. "I want a lawyer. I want to call my lawyer." You'll have the opportunity to contact legal representation at the station, ma'am. For now, I need you to gather your belongings and come with me." As Victoria stood on shaking legs to collect her purse and coat, her phone rang again. This time it was an unknown number with a U.S. area code. "Mrs. Blake." A professional female voice spoke when Victoria answered. "This is Rebecca Chen from CNN. We'd like to comment on the viral video showing you assaulting an airline CEO. Would you be available for an interview?" Victoria hung up immediately, but the phone rang again within seconds. Fox News, then NBC, then the Washington Post. Media outlets around the world were scrambling to get the first interview with the woman who had become a symbol of racist entitlement. "Turn the phone off," Inspector O'Sullivan advised. "It's only going to make this worse." As Victoria was escorted off the aircraft in handcuffs, passengers from other sections of the plane pressed against their windows to catch a glimpse. The viral video had reached everyone on board through Wi-Fi and cellular connections. She had become infamous worldwide during a single flight. Marcus remained on the aircraft to provide his statement to authorities. The other first-class passengers lined up to give their accounts of the incident. Within 2 hours, the Irish police had collected testimony from 11 witnesses, video evidence from 4 different angles, and a clear pattern of escalating racist behavior leading to physical assault. While Victoria was being processed at Shannon Police Station, the consequences were cascading across the Atlantic. Blake Logistics' stock price was in free fall as investors fled. Major clients were calling emergency meetings to discuss terminating contracts. Chad Blake was locked in his office with his lawyers trying to determine if the company could survive the scandal. The country club where Victoria served on the board called an emergency meeting to discuss her membership. 3 charities removed her from their advisory boards via email. Her personal trainer, hairstylist, and even her dry cleaner were fielding calls from reporters asking for comments about her character. Meanwhile, social media had turned Victoria into a cautionary tale. Tomatogate spawned thousands of memes. Comedians were already working her assault into their routines. Law schools were discussing the case as an example of how quickly privilege and entitlement could destroy a life. But perhaps the most devastating consequence was the one playing out in her own home. Chad Blake sat in his study, looking at financial projections that showed Blake Logistics declaring bankruptcy within days without the Apex Airways contract. 300 employees would lose their jobs. Pension funds would be devastated. A family business built over 20 years would be destroyed because his wife couldn't treat a black man with basic human respect. His phone buzzed with a text from his teenage daughter at college. "Dad is Mom, the racist woman from the airplane video my friends are asking." Chad stared at the message, unsure how to explain to his children that their mother had become the most hated person on the internet. Back at Shannon Airport, Marcus was completing his statement when Inspector O'Sullivan approached him with an update. "Mr. Williams, Mrs. Blake has been formally charged with assault under Irish law. She'll remain in custody pending a bail hearing tomorrow morning. Given the international attention this case has received, I expect the courts will take it very seriously." "Thank you, Inspector. What about extradition to the United States?" "The U.S. authorities have already filed requests. She'll face federal charges there as well. Assault on an aircraft, violation of civil rights, possibly terrorism charges, depending on how the prosecutors want to handle it." Marcus nodded. "I want to be clear, Inspector. I don't take any satisfaction in this outcome. I would have preferred that Mrs. Blake simply treated people with respect, and none of this happened. But when someone commits assault while making racist statements, there have to be consequences." As Flight 827 prepared to continue its journey to London, Victoria, Blake sat in a holding cell in Shannon, watching her life unravel in real time on a small television mounted to the wall. The news was covering her story continuously now. Expert panels discussed her psychology. Legal analysts predicted her sentences. Social commentators used her case to discuss larger issues of racism and privilege. The viral video had been viewed over 100 million times. Her face was known worldwide as a symbol of entitled racism. Her husband's business was collapsing. Her children were ashamed to share her name. Her friends had abandoned her, all because she couldn't treat a gate agent with respect, all because she couldn't accept a black man's right to sit in first class, all because she threw a glass of tomato juice at someone she thought was powerless to stop her. Victoria Blake had learned in the hardest way possible that everyone has power. And sometimes the person you're discriminating against has enough power to change your life forever. As Marcus's flight finally departed Shannon for London, he reflected on a conversation he'd had with his father years earlier. "Son, you can judge a person's character by how they treat someone who can't fight back. But you can judge a society by what happens when those people finally get the power to fight back." Today, justice had fought back. And it had won. 3 months later, Marcus Williams stood in the same terminal at JFK International Airport, where Victoria Blake's racist tirade had first begun. He was dressed casually again, dark jeans and a navy pullover, conducting another ghost flight evaluation. But this time, the Apex Airways gate area looked different. A new policy placard hung prominently behind the customer service desk. Apex Airways is committed to dignity and respect for all passengers and employees. Discrimination of any kind will result in immediate removal from our aircraft and permanent banning from our services. Kevin Rodriguez was still at Gate 42, but now he wore a supervisor's badge and was training 2 new customer service representatives. The young man who had endured Victoria's verbal assault with such grace had been promoted to customer service training manager with a full scholarship to complete his business degree. Remember, Kevin was telling his trainees, every passenger deserves respect regardless of how they're dressed, what they look like, or how much they paid for their ticket. Our job is to provide excellent service to everyone. Marcus smiled, remembering his father's words about dignity being earned through how we treat others, not how others treat us. The aftermath of Flight 827 had been swift and comprehensive. Victoria Blake had been sentenced to 6 months in prison in Ireland, followed by deportation and federal charges in the United States. She had received an additional year of house arrest, 500 hours of community service, and a lifetime ban from all major airlines worldwide. The assault video, with over 500 million views, had become a case study in business schools about the consequences of discriminatory behavior. Chad Blake had been forced to declare bankruptcy within 2 weeks of the incident. Blake Logistics contracts had been terminated by multiple companies seeking to distance themselves from the scandal. However, Marcus had ensured that the company's 300 employees were offered positions with other Apex Airways contractors, and many had landed in better jobs with higher wages. The country club had not only revoked Victoria's membership, but had also implemented new diversity and inclusion training for all members and staff. Her charitable board positions had been filled by people actually committed to the causes rather than using them for social status. But perhaps the most meaningful transformation was happening right here at JFK, where the confrontation had begun. "Mr. Stone." Sarah Mitchell's voice interrupted Marcus's observations. She was working this flight as well, part of his ongoing quality assurance program. "Your flight is ready for boarding. Would you like to board with first class?" Sarah had also been promoted following the incident to Chief of Passenger Experience, responsible for implementing new anti-discrimination policies across Apex Airways' entire fleet. Her grace under pressure during Victoria's assault had become legendary within the company. "Thank you, Sarah. Lead the way." As they walked toward the aircraft, Marcus noticed a young black businessman in line ahead of them. The man was dressed in a hoodie and jeans remarkably similar to what Marcus had worn on that fateful flight. Marcus watched as the gate agents processed his ticket with perfect professionalism, smiling warmly and offering assistance without any questioning of his right to be in first class. The changes went deeper than policies and training. The entire culture of air travel had shifted following the viral incident. Flight attendants reported feeling more empowered to address discriminatory passenger behavior. Travelers were more aware of how their words and actions affected others. Airport staff had seen a marked decrease in abusive behavior toward employees. Marcus boarded the aircraft and took his assigned seat, 2A this time. The suite next to him, 2B, remained empty. It had been deliberately left unoccupied on all of his ghost flights since the incident, a small reminder of how quickly a situation could escalate when prejudice and entitlement collided. As the aircraft prepared for takeoff, Marcus pulled out his tablet and reviewed the latest quarterly report. Customer satisfaction scores were at an all-time high. Employee retention had improved dramatically. Most importantly, incident reports involving passenger discrimination had dropped by 73% across the industry, as other airlines had implemented similar zero-tolerance policies. His phone buzzed with a text from David Rodriguez's boss, "You should see this." Attached was a photo of Victoria Blake in an orange community service vest cleaning litter along a highway outside Atlanta. She looked older, tired, humbled by her fall from grace. But she was doing the work, fulfilling her court-ordered service. Marcus had heard through legal channels that Victoria had enrolled in anger management classes and diversity training. Her lawyer had indicated that she was genuinely attempting to understand and change her behavior, though whether that change was authentic or simply motivated by legal necessity remained to be seen. The real test would come when her sentence was complete, when the media attention had faded, when she had to choose every day how to treat the gate agents, flight attendants, restaurant servers, and retail workers she encountered in her new, much smaller world. As Flight 147 climbed to cruising altitude, Marcus reflected on his father's legacy. Samuel Williams had spent 30 years loading luggage into the cargo holds of aircraft he would never ride in as a passenger. He had endured countless small humiliations from travelers who saw him as invisible or inferior. But he had raised his son to believe that dignity wasn't about where you sat on the plane. It was about how you treated the people who helped you get there. The viral video of Victoria's assault had been viewed by nearly 1 billion people worldwide. But for Marcus, the real victory wasn't in her punishment. It was in Kevin Rodriguez's promotion, in Sarah Mitchell's new leadership role in the culture of respect that was spreading throughout the aviation industry. Change didn't happen because one racist passenger was held accountable. Change happened because people like Kevin and Sarah and thousands of other service workers around the world saw that their dignity mattered, that their professional excellence was valued, that someone with power was willing to use it to protect them. Marcus opened his laptop and began working on a speech he would deliver next week to the International Aviation Ethics Council. The industry had invited him to discuss implementing the APEX standard, the comprehensive anti-discrimination protocols his airline had developed following the incident. But as he typed, Marcus found himself thinking not about policies and procedures, but about the simple human moment when Victoria Blake had looked at him and decided he didn't belong in first class because of the color of his skin. That moment of casual, confident prejudice had revealed something important about how discrimination worked in the modern world. Not through dramatic gestures or overt violence, but through 1,000 small assumptions about who belonged where and who deserved what. The tomato juice had dried and washed out. The criminal charges had been resolved. The business consequences had played out. But the real work of creating a more just and equitable world happened in everyday interactions between human beings who chose to see each other's dignity rather than their differences. As the aircraft soared over the Atlantic, Marcus Williams smiled and returned to his work, knowing that his father would be proud not of the wealth or power he had accumulated, but of the moment when he had chosen to stand up for a young gate agent being bullied by someone who thought her status made her untouchable. Sometimes justice came from the courts, sometimes it came from the market. But most often it came from ordinary people making the choice to treat each other with respect, one interaction at a time. And that was a legacy worth building, one flight at a time. Victoria learned the hardest lesson of her life, that character, not wealth, determines worth. Her fall from grace became a powerful reminder that how we treat others when we think no one important is watching reveals who we truly are. Marcus proved that true power isn't about retaliation, it's about transformation. By turning one moment of injustice into a movement for change, he honored his father's legacy while protecting future travelers from discrimination. The viral moment that began with spilled tomato juice became a turning point for an entire industry. Sometimes justice doesn't just come from the courts. It comes from courage, dignity, and the unwavering belief that every person deserves to be treated with respect, regardless of how they're dressed or what they look like. Have you ever witnessed discrimination in your travels? Have you stood up for someone being mistreated? Share your story in the comments below, because every voice matters in creating a more respectful world. If this story moved you, hit that like button to help us reach more people with these important messages about dignity and justice. Don't forget to subscribe and ring that notification bell so you never miss our stories about everyday heroes standing up for what's right. Share this video with someone who needs to be reminded that kindness and respect cost nothing but mean everything. Together, we can make sure stories like Marcus and Victoria's lead to lasting change one interaction at a time.